My grandson called me in the middle of the night with a shaking voice. "Please, Grandma, don't go home. Stay where you are." I asked, "Why?" "Please, trust me." 10 minutes later, 17 police cars surrounded my street. I was shocked by the truth. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The phone rang at 3:17 in the morning, cutting through the silence like a blade. I fumbled for it in the darkness of Margaret's guest room, my heart already racing. Nobody calls at this hour with good news. "Grandma?" Wade's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with something I'd never heard before. Fear. "Wade? Honey, what's wrong?" I sat up, pushing my gray hair from my face. The digital clock glowed red in the darkness, and I could hear Margaret stirring in the room next door. "Please, Grandma, don't go home tonight. Stay where you are." "What do you mean, don't go home? Wade, you're scaring me." There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing heavily. "I can't explain everything right now, but please, just trust me. Don't go back to your house tonight." My stomach twisted. I'd been at Margaret's since yesterday afternoon after that awful dinner with Carol. My daughter had been so insistent about discussing my future plans, as she called them. The way she'd looked at me across that dining room table, calculating and cold, had made me uncomfortable enough to accept Margaret's invitation to stay the night. "Wade, sweetheart, you have to tell me what's happening. Is someone hurt? Is it your mother?" "No, nobody's hurt. But Grandma, I'm serious. Something's not right. I overheard Mom on the phone earlier and she was talking about tonight, about your house." The fear in his voice sent ice through my veins. Wade was 22, studying engineering at the university, and he'd never been one for dramatics. If he was this frightened, something was very wrong. "What did she say exactly?" Another pause. I could hear voices in the background, distant and muffled. "I couldn't catch everything, but she mentioned something about evidence and making sure you weren't there when they came. Grandma, please, just stay put until morning." "I'm trying to figure this out." "They? Who's they, Wade?" But the line went quiet, not dead, just silent, as if he was listening to something else. Then his voice came back, urgent and low. "I have to go. Someone's coming. Just promise me you'll stay where you are." "Wade, wait." The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness, holding the phone against my chest, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Outside Margaret's window, the suburban street was quiet, lined with the same modest houses that had stood there for 40 years. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. But Wade's voice kept echoing in my mind. The terror in it was real. I slipped out of bed and padded to the window, pulling back the lace curtain just enough to peek out. Margaret lived 6 blocks from my house on Elm Street, close enough that I could walk home if I wanted to. The street lamps cast long shadows across the empty sidewalks, and nothing seemed out of place. My hands were shaking as I set the phone on the nightstand. Carol had been acting strange lately, more so than usual. Ever since Dad passed away 2 years ago, she'd been asking pointed questions about our finances, about what he might have left behind. I'd told her the truth. There wasn't much. Dad had been a mechanic his whole life, and we'd lived modestly. The house was paid off, thank God, and there was a small life insurance policy, but nothing that would change anyone's life. But Carol didn't seem to believe me. Last month, she'd started dropping hints about how I was getting older, and might need help managing things. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Yesterday's dinner had been the worst yet. She'd brought legal documents, papers about power of attorney and estate planning. When I'd refused to sign anything, her mask had slipped just enough for me to see the anger underneath. "Mom, you're being unreasonable," she'd said, her voice tight with controlled frustration. "I'm just trying to help you plan for the future." But it hadn't felt like help. It had felt like a trap. I was still standing at the window when I saw them. Red and blue lights reflecting off the houses, growing brighter as they approached. My breath caught in my throat as the first police car turned onto Margaret Street, followed by another, then another. They kept coming. I counted them as they passed. 5, 6, 7 police cars, all heading in the same direction, toward Elm Street, toward my house. My legs felt weak as I sank into the chair by the window. Whatever Wade had overheard, whatever Carol had been planning, it was happening right now. 17 police cars, I could see the last few bringing up the rear, all converging on my quiet neighborhood at 3:30 in the morning. What had my daughter done? The realization hit me like a physical blow. Carol had set something up, something that required police involvement. She'd made sure I wouldn't be home when it happened. Wade must have overheard enough to know I was in danger, but not enough to understand what kind. I thought about calling the police myself, but what would I say? That my daughter might be framing me for something? They'd think I was a confused old woman having delusions about her family. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her robe pulled tight around her thin frame. "Winifred?" I heard voices. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," I whispered, still staring out the window. "I honestly don't know." She came to stand beside me, following my gaze to the distant glow of emergency lights. "Good heavens, what's all that commotion?" I said slowly, "my daughter just tried to destroy my life." The phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Margaret made coffee at 5 in the morning, and we sat at her kitchen table watching the sun rise over the neighborhood that had been my home for 38 years. The police lights had disappeared around 4, but the silence they left behind felt heavier than their presence. Wade called at 7:15, his voice strained but relieved. "Grandma, are you okay? You stayed put, right?" "I'm at Margaret's." "Wade, what happened? I saw all those police cars." "They searched your house, Grandma. They had a warrant and everything." My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. "A warrant? For what?" "I'm not sure exactly. Mom wouldn't tell me much, but she's been talking to the police since 5 this morning. She keeps saying they found what they were looking for." The bottom fell out of my world. What they were looking for? Wade, I don't understand any of this. "I know, Grandma. That's why I called you last night. I overheard Mom on the phone with someone talking about how the police needed to search the house while you weren't there. She said something about evidence and how you'd probably try to hide it if you knew they were coming." Evidence. The word sat in my stomach like a stone. Evidence of what? I don't know. "But Grandma," his voice dropped even lower, "Mom's been telling people that Grandpa left money hidden somewhere. She's been saying you've been lying about the family finances." I felt the color drain from my face. Margaret, who'd been pretending not to listen, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Wade, your grandfather didn't leave any hidden money. You know how we lived. He worked at Peterson's garage for 42 years, and every penny we made went to raising your mother and keeping this family together. I believe you, Grandma, but Mom, she's convinced there's something. She's been talking to Uncle Mark about it for weeks. They think you've been hiding assets or something." Uncle Mark, Carol's husband, who'd never worked a steady job in his life but always had opinions about other people's money. The same man who'd borrowed $3,000 from us 5 years ago and never paid it back. "Has your mother said anything else?" "Anything about what the police supposedly found?" Wade hesitated. "She's been really weird about it. She told me this morning that the investigation might take a while and that you shouldn't come home until it's resolved. She said it would be better for everyone if you stayed somewhere else." Better for everyone. The phrase made my skin crawl. Carol had been using those same words for months whenever she talked about my future. It would be better for everyone if I simplified my life. Better for everyone if I let her help manage my affairs. Better for everyone if I signed those papers. "Wade, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I want you to stay away from your mother for a few days. Don't ask her questions. Don't let her know we've talked. Can you do that?" "Grandma, you're scaring me again." "I'm scared too, honey. But I think your mother has done something terrible. And until I figure out what it is, I need you to be careful." After I hung up, Margaret and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "You know, dear, I've never liked that daughter of yours." I almost smiled despite everything. Margaret had been my neighbor and friend for 20 years, and she'd never made any secret of her feelings about Carol. Where I saw a difficult child who'd grown into a complicated adult, Margaret saw something darker. She's always been demanding, I said. Even as a little girl, she thought the world owed her something. This is different, Winifred. This isn't about being demanding. This is calculated. She was right, and I knew it. Carol hadn't just stumbled into this situation. She'd planned it, orchestrated it, maybe for months. The legal documents at dinner hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment thing. They'd been part of a larger strategy. My phone rang again. Carol's name appeared on the screen, and my heart started racing. Mom? Her voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the tension underneath. I heard you weren't home last night. Are you all right? I'm fine. I stayed at Margaret's. Oh, a pause. Well, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. The police came to your house early this morning. They had a warrant to search for some things related to Dad's estate. The lie came so smoothly, as if she'd practiced it. What things, Carol? Well, it seems there might have been some irregularities in how Dad's affairs were handled after he passed. The authorities need to investigate some financial discrepancies. Financial discrepancies. My hands clenched into fists. Dad's affairs had been simple. I'd handled everything with our family lawyer, filed all the necessary papers, paid all the taxes. There had been no irregularities because there had been nothing irregular to handle. What kind of discrepancies? Mom, I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Why don't you come home? We can sit down and go through everything together. Come home. To the house that had just been searched by 17 police cars. To whatever trap she'd set for me there. I think I'll stay here a bit longer, Carol. Margaret and I are having a nice visit. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then Carol's voice came back, sharper now. Mom, you can't hide at Margaret's forever. Whatever Dad was involved in, whatever you might know about it, it's going to come out eventually. It would be better if you came forward voluntarily. There it was, the accusation, wrapped in concern but unmistakable. Carol wasn't just claiming Dad had hidden money. She was suggesting I'd been complicit in hiding it. Carol, your father wasn't involved in anything dishonest, and neither was I. The evidence suggests otherwise. Evidence. That word again. What evidence? I think we should discuss this with the lawyers present, Mom. I'm trying to protect you here. Protect me. From what? From the lies she'd apparently told the police? From the evidence she'd somehow manufactured? I'll call you later, Carol. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly that Margaret had to help me set the phone down. She's framing you, Margaret said quietly. Your own daughter is trying to frame you for something. The words hung in the air between us, awful and undeniable. But even as I tried to reject the idea, pieces were falling into place. Carol's sudden interest in Dad's finances, her insistence on those legal documents, her questions about insurance policies and bank accounts. She'd been building a case against me, step by step. And now, whatever she'd planted in my house, the police had found it. Wade appeared at Margaret's door at 2 p.m, his face pale and his hands shaking. He'd driven straight from campus, he said, because he couldn't wait any longer to tell me what he'd discovered. Grandma, we need to talk, privately. Margaret excused herself to the garden, and Wade sat across from me at the same kitchen table where I'd spent the morning trying to make sense of my daughter's betrayal. He pulled out his phone and set it between us. I recorded something last night, after I called you. My heart sank. Wade, what did you do? I went back to Mom's house. I had to know what was really going on. He ran his hands through his dark hair, so much like his grandfather's. I used my key and went in through the back door. Mom and Uncle Mark were in the living room, and they were. They were celebrating. Celebrating. Wade's voice was barely above a whisper. They were drinking champagne and talking about how everything had gone perfectly, how the police found exactly what they expected to find. He pressed play on his phone, and Carol's voice filled the quiet kitchen. The sound of my daughter's laughter made my blood run cold. I told you it would work, she was saying, her words slightly slurred. The old bank statements were perfect. Who's going to question documents from 1998? Mark's voice joined hers. And the safety deposit box key? Genius. They'll spend months trying to figure out what account it belongs to. By then, we'll have power of attorney and control of everything. Mom won't be able to fight it from a psychiatric facility. My hands flew to my mouth. Psychiatric facility. The words hit me like a physical blow. Wade paused the recording. There's more, Grandma. It gets worse. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I could handle worse. Carol's voice continued. The beauty of it is that she actually believes Dad was honest about their finances. She has no idea about the accounts he set up, the investments he made, 23 years of skimming money from that garage, and she never suspected a thing. How much do you think is really there? Mark asked. Has to be at least 200,000, maybe more. Dad was careful, but he wasn't stupid. He knew Mom would never approve of taking money from old Peterson, so he kept it separate. I felt the room spinning around me. Wade reached across the table and gripped my hand. Grandma, they're lying. About Grandpa, about the money, about everything. But Carol wasn't finished. The psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for next week. Dr. Henderson owes me a favor, and he's already reviewed the evidence of her mental decline. Memory loss, paranoid delusions about family members, inability to manage finances. Once she's declared incompetent, we can have her committed and take control of her assets. Wade stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at the phone, trying to process what I'd just heard. My daughter hadn't just planted evidence to frame me for hiding money. She'd created an entire fictional narrative about my late husband being a thief. Worse, she was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent and committed to a psychiatric facility. Wade, the bank statements they mentioned, Where would Carol get old documents from 1998? She's been going through your house for months, Grandma. Every time you went to the grocery store or to church, she was there with her key, looking through your papers. She probably found some old statements and modified them somehow. Modified them. Forged them. More likely. Created fake deposits. Fake transactions. Fake evidence of money that never existed. And this safety deposit box key? Wade's face flushed with anger. She bought it at an antique store. I saw the receipt in her purse last week, but I didn't think anything of it. It's just an old key that doesn't belong to any real account. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture so monstrous I could barely comprehend it. Carol had spent months planning this. She'd planted forged bank statements in my house, along with a fake safety deposit box key. She'd reported these discoveries to the police, claiming I'd been hiding assets. And now she was planning to use the resulting investigation as evidence that I was mentally unstable. Wade, this Dr. Henderson she mentioned, he's the psychiatrist Uncle Mark goes to, the one who helps him get his disability payments renewed every year. Of course. Mark had been claiming psychological disability for the past 5 years, ever since he'd been fired from his last job for stealing. If Dr. Henderson was willing to falsify reports for Mark, he'd probably do the same for the right price. There's something else, Grandma. Wade's voice was heavy with dread. I heard them talking about next steps. Once you're committed, they plan to sell your house and liquidate all your assets. They figure by the time anyone questions what they're doing, the money will be long gone. I felt physically sick. My own daughter was planning to steal everything I had, lock me away in an institution, and leave me with nothing. And she was doing it all while claiming to be concerned about my welfare. Wade, we have to call the police. With what? This recording? I made it illegally, Grandma. They'll never be able to use it in court. He was right, and we both knew it. Even if the recording were admissible, it would be my word against Carol's. She'd already established herself as the concerned daughter trying to help her aging mother. I'd look like a paranoid old woman making wild accusations against her own family. But we can't just let her do this. Wade leaned forward, his young face set with determination. We're not going to let her do anything, but we have to be smart about it. What do you mean? I mean, we let her think her plan is working. We let her believe you're falling for the trap. And while she's busy congratulating herself, we figure out how to turn the tables. I stared at my grandson, this boy I'd helped raise, and saw his grandfather's stubborn streak shining through. That's dangerous, Wade. If she succeeds in having me committed, she won't succeed, because we're going to beat her at her own game. The plan Wade outlined was risky, but it was the only chance we had. I would return home and act confused about the police search. I'd play into Carol's narrative about being overwhelmed and unable to manage my affairs. I'd even agree to see Dr. Henderson, the corrupt psychiatrist. But while Carol thought she was manipulating me, we'd be gathering evidence of her crimes. Wade would continue recording conversations when possible. We'd document every lie, every forged document, every step of her conspiracy. The most important thing, Wade said, is that she can't know we're onto her. You have to act like the confused old woman she wants you to be. It went against every instinct I had. I'd spent 64 years standing up for myself, speaking my mind, refusing to let anyone push me around. Now I had to pretend to be weak, helpless, the perfect victim for my daughter's scheme. But if it was the only way to save myself, I'd do it. There's one more thing we need to consider, I said. If Carol is willing to go this far, if she's willing to have her own mother committed to steal her money, what else might she be capable of? Wade's face went white. We both understood what I was asking. A woman who could plan such an elaborate betrayal, who could look her mother in the eye and pretend to care while orchestrating her destruction, wasn't someone who would accept defeat gracefully. When her plan failed, and we had to believe it would fail, Carol would be desperate. And desperate people, especially those with nothing left to lose, could be very dangerous indeed. The recording had revealed the depths of my daughter's betrayal. But it had also shown us something else. We were running out of time. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for next week. Whatever we were going to do, we had to do it fast. Going back to my house felt like walking into a crime scene. Wade drove me home at 6 p.m, 3 days after the police search, and the moment I stepped through my front door, I could feel that strangers had been through my most private spaces. They'd been careful, I'll give them that. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but I knew my home like other people know their own reflection. The stack of bills on the kitchen counter was too neat. The photo albums in the living room were slightly out of order. Someone had been through everything I owned, looking for evidence of crimes I'd never committed. Carol arrived 20 minutes later, her face arranged in an expression of concerned sympathy that might have fooled me if I hadn't heard that recording. "Oh, Mom," she said, wrapping me in a hug that felt like being embraced by a snake. "I'm so sorry you had to come home to this. How are you holding up?" I forced myself to look confused and fragile. "I don't understand what they were looking for, Carol. Your father and I always paid our taxes, always followed the law." "I know, Mom, but sometimes people we trust can deceive us, even people we love." The irony of those words coming from her mouth was almost too much to bear. I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. She guided me to the kitchen table and sat across from me, pulling a folder from her purse. "The police shared some of what they found with me, since I'm your next of kin. Mom, I think Dad might have been involved in some things that weren't entirely legal." She opened the folder and spread out photocopied bank statements. Even from across the table, I could see they were supposedly from First National Bank, dated from 1998 through 2003. The account holder was listed as Harold Mitchell, my late husband's name. "These show regular deposits that don't match Dad's salary from the garage," Carol said, her voice gentle but insistent. "Thousands of dollars every month, all in cash." I stared at the papers, trying to look shocked rather than disgusted. The forgeries were good. Whoever had created them had used the right fonts, the right formatting. But I knew they were lies because I'd balanced our checkbook every month for 43 years of marriage. Harold had never hidden money from me because he'd never been the type of man who could keep secrets. "Carol, this can't be right. Your father would never." "Mom, I know it's hard to accept, but look at this." She pulled out another document, a supposed rental agreement for a safety deposit box. "They found the key in your bedroom, hidden in Dad's old jewelry box. The key I'd never seen before in my life. The key Wade had told me she'd bought at an antique store." "I don't remember this key," I said, which was completely true. Carol's eyes sharpened slightly. "Memory can be tricky as we get older, Mom. Sometimes we forget things, especially traumatic things. It's possible Dad swore you to secrecy about the money and you've just blocked it out." Blocked it out. She was laying the groundwork for her mental incompetency claim, making my supposed memory loss part of the narrative. "What does this mean?" I asked, gesturing at the papers. "It means Dad might have been stealing from Peterson's garage for years. And if you knew about it, if you helped him hide the money," she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "But I didn't know about any money. Carol, you have to believe me. I do believe you, Mom. I think Dad kept you in the dark about most of it. But the police need to investigate thoroughly. They need to find out where all this money went. Where it went. Of course, since the money had never existed in the first place, Carol couldn't produce it. So she was setting up a scenario where the money had disappeared, possibly hidden somewhere only I would know. In the meantime, Carol continued, I think it would be best if you weren't living alone. This kind of stress, at your age, with your memory already showing some gaps. I'm worried about you. There it was, the opening move toward having me committed. I'm fine here, Carol. This is my home. Mom, yesterday you called me 3 times asking the same question about Dad's funeral arrangements. You forgot that Margaret picked you up for church last Sunday and accused me of lying when I reminded you. These are signs of cognitive decline. I had done no such things, but I realized Carol was creating a fictional history of mental incompetence, probably documenting these supposed incidents somewhere, building her case piece by piece. I think you should see someone, she continued. A professional who can help you process all this stress and confusion. I've already made an appointment with Dr. Henderson for Monday morning. Dr. Henderson, the corrupt psychiatrist who would declare me mentally unfit for the right price. I don't need a psychiatrist, Carol. Her mask slipped just slightly, and I caught a glimpse of the calculation underneath. Mom, this isn't optional. Given what's happening with the investigation, given your obvious confusion about Dad's activities, the family has decided this is necessary. The family. As if Mark's opinion counted for anything. As if she'd consulted anyone other than her equally corrupt husband. What if I refuse? Carol's smile turned cold. Mom, if you're not competent to make medical decisions for yourself, then the responsibility falls to your next of kin. I'm just trying to help you get the care you need. The threat was clear. Cooperate with the psychiatric evaluation, or she'd have me declared incompetent anyway and force the issue. Either way, I ended up in Dr. Henderson's office, where he'd rubber stamp whatever diagnosis Carol wanted. After she left, I sat alone in my violated home, surrounded by the remnants of my life that she was systematically destroying. But Wade's words echoed in my mind. We had to be smart about this. We had to let her think she was winning while we gathered the evidence to expose her. The next morning, I called my real doctor, Dr. Patricia Wells, who'd been treating me for 15 years. I explained that I needed a complete physical and mental health evaluation, and I needed it before Monday. Dr. Wells was confused but accommodating, and by Friday afternoon, I had official documentation that I was in excellent health, both physically and mentally. I also drove to First National Bank, where I'd done business for 30 years. The manager, Tom Bradley, remembered me well. When I showed him copies of the forged bank statements, his face went white. Mrs. Mitchell, these are definitely not from our bank. The account numbers don't match our format, and we changed our statement design in 1996. These documents are fraudulent. Would you be willing to put that in writing? Absolutely. And, Mrs. Mitchell, you should probably contact the police about this. Document forgery is a serious crime. I also visited Peterson's garage, where Harold had worked for over 4 decades. Old Mr. Peterson had passed away, but his son Rick was running the business now. Rick had worked alongside Harold for 20 years and was genuinely shocked when I told him about the allegations. Mrs. Mitchell, your husband was the most honest man I've ever known. He wouldn't steal a paperclip, let alone thousands of dollars. Our books from that period are still in storage. I'd be happy to have them audited to prove Harold never took a penny. By Sunday evening, I had documentation proving the bank statements were forged, testimony from the garage owner vouching for Harold's integrity, and medical records showing I was mentally competent. But I still had to play Carol's game for one more day. Wade came over Sunday night, ostensibly to check on me, but really to go over our plan one final time. Tomorrow, you go to the appointment with Dr. Henderson, he said. Let him think he's manipulating you. Answer his questions the way Carol told you to. Let him believe you're confused and overwhelmed. What if he tries to have me committed immediately? He won't. Carol needs time to get the legal paperwork in order. She'll want at least a week to set everything up before she makes her move. And you'll be recording everything? Wade nodded. I'll be in the waiting room with my phone. Doctor, Henderson's office has thin walls. I tested it last week when I went in to check on Uncle Mark's treatment. I looked around my living room, at the family photos that covered every surface, at the furniture Harold and I had saved up to buy piece by piece over the decades. Tomorrow, if everything went according to Carol's plan, this would all be lost to me forever, but if our counterplan worked, it would be Carol who lost everything. Wade, there's something I need you to know. If this goes wrong, if somehow she succeeds in having me committed, I want you to have power of attorney over my affairs. I've already had the papers drawn up. His eyes filled with tears. Grandma, it's not going to come to that. But if it does, I continued, I need to know you'll fight for me, that you won't let her win. I'll fight for you no matter what. You saved me when Mom would have destroyed me too. Now it's my turn to save you. As Wade left that night, I realized something that should have terrified me but instead filled me with a strange kind of peace. Tomorrow wasn't just about exposing Carol's crimes, it was about finally understanding who my daughter really was underneath all the lies and manipulation. And once I knew that, once the mask was completely off, I'd finally know how to fight back. Dr. Henderson's office smelled like stale coffee and false sympathy. The man himself was exactly what I'd expected, thin, pale, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He greeted me with practiced warmth, but I could see him cataloging my responses from the moment I walked through his door. Mrs. Mitchell, please have a seat. Your daughter has told me so much about you. I'm sure she had. I settled into the leather chair across from his desk, forcing myself to look confused and overwhelmed. In the waiting room, Wade sat with his phone discreetly positioned to record whatever happened next. Now, I understand you've been under quite a bit of stress lately, Dr. Henderson began, consulting a file that was suspiciously thick for someone he'd never met before. Tell me about these memory issues your daughter mentioned. I let my voice waver slightly. I don't remember having memory issues. Sometimes I get confused about dates, but doesn't everyone? Of course. But Carol mentioned some specific incidents. You've been calling her repeatedly with the same questions. I don't remember calling her repeatedly. Dr. Henderson made a note. And you've been forgetting important events? Church services? Appointments? I knew this was scripted. Carol had fed him a list of supposed symptoms, and he was simply checking them off. Maybe. It's hard to know what you've forgotten, isn't it? Very insightful, he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. Now, let's talk about your late husband. Carol mentioned there have been some financial irregularities discovered. The police found some papers. I don't understand what they mean. Bank statements showing large cash deposits. Do you remember your husband bringing home unusual amounts of money? I forced myself to look uncertain. Harold worked so hard. Sometimes he did side jobs fixing cars for neighbors. Maybe that's what the money was from? Dr. Henderson's pen moved across his notepad. But these were substantial amounts, Mrs. Mitchell. Thousands of dollars every month. That's a lot of side work. I trusted Harold completely. If he said the money was legitimate, then it was. Even if it meant he was stealing from his employer, the question was designed to trap me. If I defended Harold too vigorously, I'd seem delusional. If I accepted that he was a thief, I'd be admitting complicity in hiding stolen money. Harold would never steal, I said quietly. Mrs. Mitchell, the evidence suggests otherwise. Perhaps you've blocked out memories that are too painful to recall. There it was, the foundation of Carol's plan. I was either a criminal or mentally incapable of remembering my crimes. Either way, I was unfit to manage my own affairs. I don't know what to think anymore. Dr. Henderson leaned forward with fake compassion. Mrs. Mitchell, I believe you're suffering from stress-induced cognitive decline, possibly early-stage dementia. The trauma of discovering your husband's criminal activities has damaged your ability to process reality. He was moving fast, faster than I'd expected. Carol must have promised him a substantial payment to expedite my diagnosis. What does that mean? It means you need care, Mrs. Mitchell, professional care, in a facility designed to help people with your condition. Somewhere safe, where you can't hurt yourself or make decisions that might get you into legal trouble. But I feel fine. I take care of myself. I manage my house. Mrs. Mitchell, your daughter has documented multiple instances of concerning behavior. forgetting conversations, losing track of time, making accusations against family members. These are serious symptoms, documented instances. Of course, Carol had created a paper trail of fictional mental decline. She'd probably been making notes for months, building her case one fabricated incident at a time. "I want to go home," I said. "I'm afraid that's not possible. Based on my evaluation, I'm recommending immediate psychiatric hold for your own safety. Your daughter has already begun the process of obtaining emergency guardianship." The trap was closing faster than Wade and I had anticipated. Carol wasn't waiting a week. She was moving today, this afternoon, to have me committed and assume control of my affairs. "Dr. Henderson, I need to use the restroom." He hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. It's just down the hall." I walked slowly to the bathroom, my mind racing. Once I was out of sight, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Wade. "Emergency? Call attorney now." When I returned to Dr. Henderson's office, Carol was there, her face arranged in an expression of sorrowful concern that made my stomach turn. "Mom, Dr. Henderson has explained your condition. I know this is scary, but we're going to take care of you." "I don't want to go anywhere, Carol. I want to go home." "I know, Mom, but you're not well. The confusion, the memory loss, the paranoid thoughts about Dad being honest when we have proof he was stealing, these are all signs that you need professional help. Dr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've completed the psychiatric evaluation. Based on your responses and the documentation provided by your daughter, I'm recommending immediate involuntary commitment for 72 hours while we conduct a more thorough assessment." 72 hours. Once I was in their facility, Carol would have 3 days to complete her legal maneuvering. 3 days to liquidate my assets, sell my house, make herself my legal guardian. By the time I got out, if I got out, there would be nothing left to fight for. What if I refuse? Carol's mask slipped just enough for me to see the triumph underneath. "Mom, you're not competent to make that decision. I'm acting in your best interest as your next of kin." "Actually," a voice said from the doorway, "you're not her next of kin anymore." We all turned to see a woman in a business suit standing in the entrance to Dr. Henderson's office. She was holding a briefcase and a folder thick with legal documents. "I'm Sarah Chen, Mrs. Mitchell's attorney, and I'm here to inform you that your attempted fraud has been discovered and documented." Carol's face went white. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" "I'm the attorney Mrs. Mitchell contacted last week when she began to suspect her daughter was planning to defraud her. We've spent the past 5 days gathering evidence of your crimes." Ms. Chen opened her briefcase and began laying documents on Dr. Henderson's desk. "Forensic analysis of the bank statements you forged. Testimony from First National Bank confirming they're fraudulent. Documentation from Peterson's garage proving Mr. Mitchell never stole any money. And a complete psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Patricia Wells confirming Mrs. Mitchell is mentally competent." Dr. Henderson was staring at the papers as if they might explode. I don't understand." Carol provided documentation. "Carol provided forgeries," Ms. Chen said calmly. "She's been planning this fraud for months, possibly years. She created false bank statements, planted fake evidence in her mother's home, and bribed you to provide a fraudulent psychiatric diagnosis." "That's not true!" Carol's voice was shrill with panic. "My mother is confused. She's been making up stories about Dad. She can't be trusted." Ms. Chen pulled out a small digital recorder and pressed play. Carol's own voice filled the office, the recording Wade had made of her celebrating with Mark about planting evidence and planning my commitment. The blood drained from Carol's face as she listened to herself describing the forged bank statements, the fake safety deposit box key, the plan to have me declared incompetent. When the recording reached the part about having me committed to a psychiatric facility, Dr. Henderson actually moved away from his desk as if trying to distance himself from the conversation. "This is illegal," Carol whispered. "You can't record someone without their consent." "Actually," Ms. Chen replied, "in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. Your nephew Wade was present during your discussion and consented to recording it. The recording is completely legal and admissible in court." Dr. Henderson stood up abruptly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was only trying to help Mrs. Mitchell based on the information provided to me." The information you knew was fabricated, Ms. Chen said sharply. Information you agreed to corroborate in exchange for payment from Carol Mitchell. That makes you an accessory to attempted fraud and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. The room fell silent except for the sound of Carol's rapid breathing. I watched my daughter's face cycle through emotions, panic, rage, desperation, as she realized her carefully constructed plan was crumbling around her. "Wade," she said suddenly. "Wade set me up. That little bastard has been working against me this whole time." "Wade has been protecting his grandmother from your criminal conspiracy, Miss Ao," Chen corrected, "which is more than I can say for you." Carol turned to me, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the difficult child I'd raised, the demanding adult I'd tried to understand and forgive. This was someone capable of destroying her own mother for money that didn't even exist. "I haven't won anything, Carol," I said quietly. "We've all lost. I've lost a daughter, and you've lost everything else." Her laugh was bitter and sharp. "You have no idea what you've lost, Mother. You have no idea what I'm capable of." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. Ms. Chen heard it too and immediately stepped forward. "Mrs. Carol Mitchell, you're under citizen's arrest for attempted fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. The police are on their way." Through the window, I could already see the flashing lights approaching Dr. Henderson's office. But as I watched my daughter's face twist with rage and desperation, I realized this wasn't over. Carol might be caught, but a cornered animal is always at its most dangerous, and I still had to make it home alive. The police took Carol away in handcuffs, but not before she screamed at me from the back of the patrol car. Her words were muffled by the glass, but I could read her lips well enough. "This isn't over." Dr. Henderson followed in a separate car, his medical license already under investigation for the fraudulent evaluation. Wade drove me home in silence, both of us too drained to speak. The afternoon sun was slanting through the trees on Elm Street, casting long shadows across the neighborhood where I'd lived for 38 years. Everything looked the same, but I felt like I was seeing it all for the first time. "Grandma," Wade finally said as we pulled into my driveway, "are you okay?" I wasn't sure how to answer that. Was I okay? My daughter had tried to steal everything I owned, destroy my reputation, and lock me away in a psychiatric facility. She'd been willing to claim her own father was a criminal to achieve her goals. I'd spent the last week living in fear, not knowing if I'd end up imprisoned for crimes I never committed. But I was free. Carol was in jail, and I was going home to my own house, my own life, my independence intact. "I think I will be," I told him. Ms. Chen had explained that Carol would likely face charges for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted false imprisonment. Mark would probably be charged as an accessory. Dr. Henderson was looking at losing his license and possible criminal charges for medical fraud. The web of lies they'd constructed was unraveling thread by thread. "What happens now?" Wade asked as we sat in the car. "Now I try to figure out how to live with the fact that my daughter was willing to destroy me for money that never even existed." Wade was quiet for a long moment. "She's sick, Grandma. What she did, normal people don't do things like that." Maybe he was right. Maybe Carol's willingness to betray her own mother was a sign of some deeper psychological problem. But it didn't change what she'd done, or the fact that she'd shown no remorse when caught. Even in handcuffs, she'd been angry at being thwarted, not sorry for the pain she'd caused. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and police interviews. The evidence against Carol was overwhelming: the forged documents, the recordings, testimony from bank officials and garage employees. She initially tried to claim she'd been acting in my best interests, that she'd been genuinely concerned about my mental health and Dad's supposed criminal activities, but the prosecution had Wade's recording of her celebrating the success of her scheme. There was no way to explain away her laughter about planting evidence and planning my commitment. Her public defender eventually advised her to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. 3 months after that terrifying night when Wade called to warn me, Carol was sentenced to 5 years in prison for elder abuse and fraud. Mark received 2 years for conspiracy. Dr. Henderson lost his medical license and got 18 months for his role in the scheme. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly, I just felt empty. Wade came to visit me every Sunday, usually bringing his girlfriend Emma, who was studying social work at the university. She was a sweet girl who reminded me of myself at that age, earnest, optimistic, determined to make the world a better place. Wade had told her everything about what happened with Carol, and she was full of questions about elder abuse and family betrayal. "How common is this?" she asked one afternoon as we sat on my front porch. "Adult children trying to steal from their parents?" "More common than you'd think," I said. According to the prosecutor, financial abuse of elderly people by their own family members is one of the fastest-growing crimes in America. Most cases never get reported because the victims are too ashamed or too afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of losing the only family they have left. Even bad family is still family. Or so they think. Wade reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone, Grandma. You've got us." He was right, but it still hurt. For 64 years, I'd believed that family meant something. That blood ties created unbreakable bonds of loyalty and love. Carol had shattered that belief so completely that I wasn't sure I'd ever trust anyone the same way again. The house felt different now, too. I'd had all the locks changed, of course, and I'd retrieved the spare key Carol had been using to violate my privacy for months. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd contaminated something essential about my home. This place where Harold and I had raised our family, where we'd built our life together, had been turned into a crime scene by our own daughter. Ms. Chen had suggested I consider selling the house and moving somewhere Carol couldn't find me when she got out of prison. 5 years isn't forever, she'd warned. And based on her behavior, I don't think she's going to come out of this experience reformed. I'd resisted the idea at first. This house held 40 years of memories. Harold and I had painted every room, planted every flower in the garden, worn smooth the hardwood floors with decades of daily life. How could I abandon all of that because my daughter had tried to steal it from me? But as the months passed, I began to understand what Ms. Chen meant. Carol had made threats before the police took her away. She'd made it clear that she blamed me for her arrest, for her imprisonment, for the destruction of her scheme. When she got out, she'd still be angry, still be resentful, still be convinced that I owed her something. I didn't want to spend the next 5 years looking over my shoulder, wondering if every unexpected noise was Carol coming back to finish what she'd started. The decision came to me one morning as I was sorting through old photo albums. I found a picture of Carol's high school graduation, her face bright with possibility and hope. Looking at that young woman, I could almost believe she'd once been capable of love, of genuine concern for others. But then I remembered her voice on Wade's recording, laughing about planting evidence in my home. I remembered the cold calculation in her eyes as she'd tried to convince Dr. Henderson to have me committed. I remembered her rage when the plan failed, the threats she'd made as the police led her away. That young woman in the photograph was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. The person who remained was a stranger who happened to share my DNA, someone who saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle to be removed. I called Ms. Chen that afternoon. "I want to sell the house. Are you sure? It's a big decision." "I'm sure. I need to start over somewhere Carol can't reach me." Wade was supportive when I told him, though I could see the sadness in his eyes. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere warm, maybe. Somewhere I can be anonymous." "What about us? What about your life here?" I looked around the living room where we were sitting, at the family photos that lined the mantelpiece, at the furniture Harold and I had chosen together piece by piece over the decades. My life here ended the night Carol tried to have me committed. Everything since then has just been cleaning up the wreckage. The house sold quickly. Apparently, my neighborhood was still desirable to young families starting out. I used the proceeds to buy a small condo in Florida, near the ocean where Harold and I had always planned to retire. Wade helped me pack, carefully wrapping the photos and mementos I wanted to keep while donating or discarding the rest. On my last night in the house, I walked through the empty rooms one final time. The walls showed lighter rectangles where pictures had hung. The floors bore the indentations of furniture that had sat in the same spots for decades. It looked like a place where a life had happened, but that life was over now. Wade found me in the kitchen, staring out the window at the garden Harold had planted when Carol was just a baby. "Any regrets?" he asked. I thought about it seriously. Did I regret exposing Carol's crimes? Did I regret fighting back instead of quietly accepting my fate? Did I regret choosing my freedom over maintaining the illusion of family harmony? No, I said finally. No regrets. He hugged me then. This young man who'd saved my life by making that phone call at 3 a.m. "I'm going to miss you, Grandma." "I'm going to miss you too. But Wade, you did something incredibly brave. You chose what was right over what was easy, even when it meant turning against your own mother. That takes real character." "I learned that from you." Maybe he had. Maybe that was the only good thing to come out of this whole nightmare. The knowledge that Wade had the strength to stand up for what was right, even when it cost him dearly. The next morning, I loaded my car with the last of my belongings and drove away from Elm Street for the final time. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth preserving, and everything ahead of me was unknown and full of possibility. My new life in Florida has been quieter than my old one, but not lonely. I've made friends in my condo complex, joined a book club, started volunteering at the local animal shelter. Wade visits every few months, and we talk on the phone every week. He's graduated now and gotten engaged to Emma. They're planning a small wedding next spring, and they've asked me to walk Wade down the aisle since he has no father in his life. I won't be inviting Carol to the wedding, assuming she's even out of prison by then. Wade has written to her a few times, but she's never responded. I think she blames him as much as me for the failure of her scheme. In her mind, we're the villains in this story, the people who prevented her from claiming what she believed was rightfully hers. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about what she destroyed. Not just my trust or my financial security, but the relationship we might have had. I would have helped her if she'd needed money, within reason, within my means. I would have been there for her in a crisis, the way mothers are supposed to be. Instead, she chose to see me as an enemy to be defeated rather than a mother to be loved. She chose manipulation over honesty, conspiracy over conversation, betrayal over trust. Those were her choices, not mine. I can't change what she did, and I can't change who she turned out to be. But I can choose how to respond to it, and I choose freedom. I choose peace. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.